Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Appreciate you being with me. We are continuing our look at the alliterative pattern found in the Olivet Discourse in what is generally called the first section, verses 4 to 34. That pattern is preaching, persecution, power, parousia. Jesus said the gospel would be preached into all of the world as a witness to the nations before the end would come. As they would go preaching, as his apostles and disciples would go preaching the gospel, they would be persecuted, brought before Sanhedrins and before kings and before governors. They would be empowered by the miraculous power of the Holy Spirit. And Jesus promised he was coming in judgment of those persecutors in that generation. We've looked at many of the New Testament epistles. I want to share with you now from 1st and 2nd Peter. And I'm taking them together for a little bit of time consideration here, since we've been on this particular subject for a good little bit. Peter writes to those of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, province of Asia, Bithynia, etc. An extremely wide range. Now, the gospel had already been preached there. He is preaching to those who have accepted the gospel in all of those far-flung regions. Now, remember, 1 Peter, widely believed to have been written about the same time that Paul was saying the gospel has been preached to every creature under heaven. So we have the preaching. And then we have the persecution. In 1 Peter, scholars have noted this like forever. Persecution is the keynote word or concept found in 1 Peter. Over and over and over and over again, the writer, the Apostle Peter, refers to the suffering that they were enduring at that very time. Notice in 1 Peter chapter 1, he says that those to whom he was writing, were being kept by the power of God through faith. And through faith, I'm reading from the Concordant version. I've not read from this before, so it's a little bit difficult to find my spot here. Through faith, for salvation ready to be revealed in the last era, in which you are exulting briefly at present, if it must be, being sorrowed by various trials, that the testing of your faith, being much more precious than gold which is perishing, yet being tested by fire, may be found for applause and glory and honor at the unveiling of Jesus Christ. See, there's parousia. There's suffering. Now, the power aspect is not dominant, okay, in the book of 1 Peter. Yet he was writing through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 10 to 12, that it was through the miraculous inspiration of the Holy Spirit that he was making the revelation of opening up the understanding of the Old Testament Scriptures. So even though the concept of miraculous inspiration is not dominant, we don't find a lot of mentions of miracles per se, yet this idea of inspiration is right there in verses 10 to 12. So you have the preaching, Cappadocia, Pontus, Galatia, Asia. We have the persecution, and by the way, all you got to do is read 1 Peter. And you see all of these references to the suffering that they were enduring. If any man suffer as a Christian, let him glorify God on this behalf. Do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial that is already in your midst, which, by the way, proves the early dating of Revelation, because Revelation was written to the same identical audience. And in Revelation chapter 3, Jesus promised, I'm going to keep you from the hour of trial that is about to come on the whole world. And now he's writing to a specific church, and saying, I will keep you from that hour of trial. But he says, it is about to come on the whole world. Here is Peter writing to the same identical region of churches, and he's saying, don't think it's strange concerning the fiery trial that is already among you. Hello, John predicted it. Peter said it was present. Who wrote first? Prediction or fulfillment? You know what came first. So, you have the preaching, you have the persecution, you have the power, and what did Peter have to say about the parousia? Well, in 1 Peter chapter 1, he's already said that their salvation, which would come at the coming of the Lord, the revelation of Jesus, was ready to be revealed. In 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 5, he said that Christ was ready. Now look, this is from the Greek word hetoimos. Hetoimos carries with it two concepts. Number one, morally prepared. Morally prepared. Qualified, we might say. Qualified is not the greatest word, but it sort of kind of gets us there. But it's used also of temporal readiness. A bride that is ready for the wedding, that has prepared herself for the wedding, knows the wedding is at hand, right? She's not expecting it in a couple of thousand years. So Christ was ready to judge the living and the dead. 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 7, the end of all things has drawn near. That's the literal Greek. And verse 17, the appointed time for the judgment has come. That's the literal Greek. The appointed time for the judgment. What judgment? The judgment of verse 5. The judgment of the living and the dead. That's the resurrection. Do you get the point? Here in 1 Peter, written during the very same time that Paul was affirming that the gospel had been preached in all of the world, Peter is talking about the wide dispersion of the gospel, and there it talks about persecution, talks about his power of the Holy Spirit, and urges them to realize the coming of the Lord, the day of judgment, the day of the resurrection, had drawn near. This is powerful stuff. And look, I develop this and a whole lot more in my book, Into All the World, Then Comes the End, as well as demonstrating that in 2 Peter, where Peter talks about the earth and the elements that are therein shall be burned up, or more literally, shall be found, not burned up, but found or discovered. But I discuss all of this in these two books. Into all the world, then comes the end. The elements shall melt with fervent heat. I demonstrate in this book that the gospel had been preached into all of the world. The end was imminent. I demonstrate in this book that the earth and the elements that were therein were not the physical, literal, material cosmos, but the Old Covenant creation of Old Covenant Israel. That was about to be destroyed. And it was destroyed at the coming of the Lord in AD 70. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. There's a banner at the very top. Just click on it. It will save you $10 to take advantage of the August 2-book special. August 2-book special. Look, we don't have much time left in this month. Better take advantage while you can. Thank you for joining me for this morning's morning musings. I will see you on the flip side.